Did the Bitcoin BlackRock paper Bitcoin attack just end this week? Or did it just get even more terrifying than ever before? What if I told you that California just passed a law where they could seize your Bitcoin if you don't touch it for 3 years and it's sitting on an exchange? We've got a lot of information to cover today. There's a lot of rumors, there's a lot of conspiracy theories. So today I want to really try to set the record straight. And before we get to this news from the SEC, I want to play you the clip that just broke the internet in California.
You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, muy buenas tardes, members. AB 1052 will establish a legal framework to legitimize digital assets, also known as cryptocurrency and blockchain, and unclaimed property law.
Did you hear what he just said? We're going to be establishing a legal framework for unclaimed property laws. Again, to the person who might not be fully clued into what they're saying in this clip, you might think there's nothing to worry about. Okay, we're establishing a legal framework. What does this mean? Let's explore what this legal framework means in a little bit more detail. Again, we're going to ignore the governmental jargon. Again, I think a lot of these laws are deliberately overcomplicated with the language they use. Let's break down what is actually inside this bill in California that, as you can see, enables the state to seize unclaimed Bitcoin. This is simply the fact of what is going on. This new law enables the state to seize unclaimed Bitcoin. Let's break down the specifics because there are some catches here. So the first little point I want to draw your attention to, California lawmakers advanced on Wednesday bill number AB 1052. That calls for cryptocurrencies to be seized by the state after holders have stopped showing an interest in their tokens for at least 3 years. So that is the facts. If you have Bitcoin sitting on an exchange today, and if you do not move it in 3 years, this means the state can seize your Bitcoin. Now, again, I want to be fair. I want to represent both sides of the argument, because then other people are saying, look, this is just how these policies and rules work. It's the same for banks. This is true. If someone passes away, they've got money in the bank untouched or unclaimed for 3 years, there are similar rules and regulations. I get that argument. And again, I'm going to try to represent both sides of the argument in today's video. We can see Dennis Porter, again, friend of the channel. He's kind of representing the other side of the argument, so I want to represent it to the best of my ability. He says, we helped write the bill. So obviously we know that randoms on Twitter who don't understand policy are wrong. Again, I could be one of those randoms on Twitter. I don't fully understand the policy, and I'm very transparent with you guys when I don't understand something to the fullest of my ability. I don't understand the technical jargon associated with this bill, but from a first principles standpoint, if I zoom out and just look at things really simply, what do we see? If you don't touch your Bitcoin on an exchange for 3 years, the government is now saying we can seize it from you. Yes, you can try to claim it back in the future, but from first principles, I don't like this. Again, until today, exchanges have kind of been able to use this illusion of sovereignty. They say, look, we'll hold your Bitcoin for you, but at any time in the future, you want to take self-custody of your Bitcoin and use Bitcoin in the way it's supposed to be used, we're going to give you the ability to do that. You can take your Bitcoin. It's your keys, right? We're just holding them safe for you. Now, what I'm worried about from a first principles standpoint is this appears to be diminishing. Now it looks as if the government is trying to change those rules just a little bit. And what is the rule I always tell you guys about? It's the foot in the door marketing technique. First, they get the foot in the door, and then what happens? Once they've got that foot in the door, they are far more likely to get their way. And that's what I think this bill is, again, from a more skeptical opinion, it's scary because from a first principle standpoint, it's allowing the state to take sovereignty away from Bitcoin users. That's how it appears to me from first principles. But let's represent the other side of the story. No, California didn't pass a law to seize your idle Bitcoin. Let's break it down. Misinformation about abandoned Bitcoin. Oh boy, I'm telling you what, misinformation is going to be the hot topic. It should be the headline of today's video because again, we are going to get to the BlackRock Coinbase development that I saw happen with Bitcoin ETF in-kind redemptions. We've had just yet another development in that little story that you guys know that I like to keep my eye on because as we can see, experts weigh in on Coinbase BlackRock paper Bitcoin. Oh boy, let me tell you, we're seeing some really interesting developments when it comes to, let's just call it what it is, the realm of sovereignty today, because this week has been an interesting one. It's been an incredibly interesting one. Again, before we get to the ETF development and the government ID for social media development, let's again try to remain grounded here. Let's represent the other side of this California bill. Under California's existing unclaimed property laws, which remain unchanged, if a user hasn't performed an quote unquote act of ownership interest, such as making a transaction, accessing the account, or otherwise demonstrating awareness of the property for 3 years, the assets may, under certain circumstances, be transferred to the state's custody as unclaimed property. This is literally what the other side of the argument is saying, the not conspiratorial take. Let's read on. Contrary to what TFTC's misinformation, interesting, California may not seize abandoned Bitcoin for its own benefit. Is that contradictory? Existing laws require the state to hold unclaimed assets in their original forms, not liquidate it to cash. Now, there's a shred of truth to this statement. AB 1052, this is the new law in California, is meaning that the state would have to hold on to Bitcoin or Ethereum without liquidating them into USDT. So this is true. Let's represent that side of the argument. This bill will require the state to seize the assets and then return those assets to the person in their natural original state, like Bitcoin, like Ethereum. Whatever those assets that are seized by the state, they're now no longer able to liquidate them for cash and give the cash to the person. So the less conspiratorial side of the argument, they are saying, look, this is good. Ignore the fact that the state can seize your assets. It's good that they can return the assets in their original form. Now, again, this is important because let's not forget what happened with FTX. When FTX went bankrupt, they are supposed to be returning the Bitcoin or the other trash, the digital assets, to the owners. But what FTX is doing is it is returning it to the owners in the form of USD, and it's taking the price of the asset at when the exchange collapsed. So obviously, if you have one Bitcoin sitting in FTX, FTX collapsed at about $20,000 per coin. So instead of FTX returning you the one Bitcoin today, which is worth $105,000 a coin, they're giving you $20,000 of paper fiat because they're saying, look, at the time you had $20,000 worth of Bitcoin on our exchange. We're going to give you the $20,000. Ignore the fact that you had it held in Bitcoin. So again, I'm trying to represent both sides of the story here. Those who are in favor of this new bill in California trying to make a similar argument. They're trying to say, look, at least they return it in Bitcoin. But from first principles, I do not like the government. What's the best way to say this? Normalizing the idea of the state being able to seize your Bitcoin off an exchange. Because what is the narrative that so many people not in depth in the Bitcoin space hear? They hear HODL. You buy your Bitcoin, you never sell your Bitcoin. Again, I always encourage you guys to take self-custody of your Bitcoin, but so many people just hear that narrative. All right, I buy my Bitcoin on Coinbase and I just hodl it. I ignore the price fluctuations because all of the experts in the Bitcoin space tell me to ignore the price and just hodl it for 10 years. There would be a lot of people completely unaware of what just happened with this bill, and they probably bought Bitcoin on Coinbase and they think, look, people tell me to ignore the price, so I'm going to do that. I'm not going to log into my account. I'm not going to trade my Bitcoin. I'm just going to hodl it because that is what I am told is good to do. Again, there is probably tens of millions of people, maybe hundreds of millions of people who are currently operating under that assumption. And we need to be aware of all of these people because now the government can seize their Bitcoin. And these guys might check back in on their account in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. They've done everything right in their mind. Again, the first rule of Bitcoin is take self-custody. But again, a lot of people miss that first rule of Bitcoin. A lot of people just think it's the hodling that's important. I held on to my Bitcoin, never sold it. Bitcoin hits 1 million or 10 million. They log into Coinbase to try to take a little bit of profit. And guess what? The state of California said, no, no, no. Sorry, boy. We now hold your Bitcoin. Sorry. You didn't prove in a 3-year time span that you wanted those assets. Sorry, boys. They're ours now. And they're going to make you jump through all sorts of hoops to reclaim that Bitcoin. That is what's going to happen. That is what has already happened. And I don't like it. Not one bit. Now, I want to come back to this news because it is big. It is interesting. There's a little bit more we need to cover. But guess what else happened this week that I find absolutely fascinating? Look at the date of this, June 3rd. Bitcoin ETFs. The SEC Commissioner, Hester Peirce, has now said that the agency is going to consider in-kind redemptions. What does this mean? Does this finally scrap BlackRock's cash-settled paper Bitcoin potential? I think it might. Let's first weigh in and let's educate those who might be late. What is going on? So right now, the way that the ETFs work in America is they do not have in-kind redemptions. So what is the kind? What are we talking about? We're talking about Bitcoin. People think they're buying a Bitcoin ETF. Cash goes into the ETF and cash comes out of the ETF. We are supposed to trust that BlackRock and these other ETF issuers are taking our cash that we're depositing with them and they're buying the real Bitcoin. There is lots of evidence to show they are buying the real Bitcoin. Obviously, there are rumors suggesting, hey, they could be just doing cash-settled transactions. We're going to get to that in a moment. But that is what not an in-kind redemption is. When people want to, sell their BlackRock IBIT shares of the Bitcoin ETF, they get cash. Okay, so this is not an in-kind redemption. Now, what looks to be potentially changing is in the future, Hester Peirce wants it to be a possibility for people to be able to sell their shares of the Bitcoin BlackRock ETF and all the others, the Fidelity ETF, the Bitwise ETF, and they actually get Bitcoin. This would be an in-kind redemption. Again, it's a little bit complicated. It's way above my head, but that is the potential that might be happening. And this would squash a lot of the rumors that we might see that are pretty popular in the Bitcoin space. Again, I think it's pretty interesting that these rumors of BlackRock Bitcoin, there's a lot of rumors circulating that, hey, do these ETFs hold the Bitcoin? They do. Look, a counter argument to that take is this chart right here. I mean, it is pretty clear that the supply on exchanges has rapidly been shrinking. This is one of my favorite charts. I show it to you guys nearly every day, and that's because I think it is the most underappreciated, under-recognized chart in the entire Bitcoin space. We can see very clearly coins are flying off the exchanges, and this trend really started when did it start? It started when the ETFs were launched. I'm trying to zoom in, but my big head's in the way. Let me try. You guys can see when this trend started. This is a 2.5-year chart, the one I've got on screen right now. And you can see pretty clearly the supply suffocation really started in, 2024. I hope that's clear. That's pretty clear to me. And we've seen about 400,000 to 500,000 Bitcoin leave the exchanges just in the past 5 months. So this trend really is accelerating right now. I think it's a trend we need to be cognizant of. Again, that is a supply suffocation. Those who are denying the supply suffocation, please explain to me that chart. Now, what I think is interesting, that this Coinbase, BlackRock, paper Bitcoin speculation or rumor, this isn't just rumor. Again, I'm going to remind you guys, BlackRock has on multiple occasions demanded that Coinbase change their operating standards with them. We can see BlackRock demands 12-hour Bitcoin withdrawals from Coinbase amid rising rumors of paper Bitcoin. Again, this is not just speculation. If it were just speculation, why is BlackRock openly spending the time in forcing Coinbase to change the ways they operate? Why is that? Why is that? You guys tell me. And you know what's even more interesting? BlackRock even dumped Coinbase for some of their custody. What happened? Well, BlackRock said, yeah, you know what? We were using Coinbase, a huge, trusted custodian of the Bitcoin. But guess what? Yeah, we're going to move away from them. Check this out. This is interesting. BlackRock has a new Bitcoin custodian besides Coinbase. Well. Why is Coinbase moving? Well, why is BlackRock moving away from Coinbase? You guys tell me. Why would BlackRock move some of its custodied Bitcoin away from Coinbase, the largest and most reputable exchange in the space, to Anchorage Digital, a firm 15 times smaller than Coinbase? Just another one of those things that makes you go, that's interesting. We can see it's real. BlackRock confirms they've got a new custodian aside from everybody's favorite Coinbase. Now, again, Coinbase is rightfully coming under pressure. Now, I think the timing of this pressure is all the more interesting because let's not forget, we are witnessing this supply suffocation right now. We are witnessing coins being drained of Bitcoin supply. I have a chart, but it's not the best chart showing exactly what has gone on in Coinbase because the more recent data is even more scary when we're looking at Coinbase in particular, because Coinbase is one of the exchanges that has been drained. Now, that is because Coinbase is one of the most popular exchanges used by these massive US-centric entities who are actually buying the Bitcoin. Like Michael Saylor. A lot of these public companies are US entities. Even the ETFs, okay? A lot of this Bitcoin that's being bought by large institutions, it's being bought in America. So yes, it would make sense that the biggest American exchange does get drained as quickly as it is getting drained. But that is just a little bit of information. You guys can do what you want with that information, but it's clear. The trend is accelerating and there is nothing stopping this train. I had a question yesterday asking me about the OTC balances on exchanges. And let me tell you, the OTC balance of Bitcoin, it is also being absolutely drained. Yeah, this chart will do the job. Take a peep at this. This is Bitcoin on OTC desks. Let me zoom her out a little bit so you guys can feast on that chart. OTC balance today is It was about 450,000 Bitcoin. That's what that purple line here on the chart is measuring. There's about 450,000 Bitcoin on exchanges. What's happened? Today there's about 150,000. So quick maths tells me that's down between 60 to 70%. So the OTC, over the counter balance of Bitcoin is shrinking. And this is important because a lot of people, again, far more versed in how the price of Bitcoin is changed or impacted. A lot of people say, yes, it's important to look at the coins on exchanges, but the big boys try not to move the price and they use OTC transactions, over-the-counter transactions. And that is true. You are able to not move the price so much by using these over-the-counter trades. Very different. It's very different buying $1 billion of Bitcoin over the counter versus smash buying $1 billion of Bitcoin on Coinbase. It's going to affect the price very differently. Okay, we can see here, but the number of Bitcoin on the OTC desks is, that's rapidly shrinking. Let's be honest here. Again, for those of you guys who are looking to buy $50,000 of Bitcoin or more over the counter, I always recommend you check out the Bitcoin Well. They're the one Bitcoin exchange I trust in the space, and that is because they tell you, we don't want to hold your Bitcoin. Go take self-custody for it yourself. Okay, so again, if you do want to buy over-the-counter Bitcoin, they do have this Bitcoin Well Infinity program where you can hit that button and you can book a call with a specialist at a time that suits you best. And your very own specialist will hold your hand in the Bitcoin buying journey and help you buy that Bitcoin over the counter. So again, check them out if you do want to check them out. But a lot of people do ask me about that OTC trend of Bitcoin and why it's shrinking as rapidly as it is today. And again, we compare that to the normal exchanges. We can see we're also seeing a supply suffocation going on there. There is absolutely nothing stopping this train. It is not slowing down. Congrats to the last two of 9/11 if you did just move $400,000 to Bitcoin to self-custody. Kudos. Let's have a look at the chat. Let's have a look at the chat, see what you guys think about this speculation. Or we can jump straight into what the experts think. Oh, I love it when we're talking about the experts. Let's hear what the experts, Eric Balkunas, thinks about these rumors surrounding Coinbase and BlackRock. Again, if there's nothing to worry here, why are we seeing the SEC come out and say, yeah, you know what, we want to try to go through all of this trouble to change the laws for the Bitcoin ETFs? Why are we seeing that? Why are we seeing Hester Peirce from the SEC trying to change these laws? I don't know. But again, this happened just earlier in the week. We could be seeing in-kind redemptions for the Bitcoin ETFs. The SEC initially approved Bitcoin ETFs in early 2024. On the verge of the approval, BlackRock agreed to exclude in-kind redemptions, caving to a key demand from the regulator. I didn't make that up. BlackRock was the one who said, nah, we don't want to do in-kind redemptions. If in-kind redemptions are allowed, investors would be able to receive the actual underlying asset, the Bitcoin, instead of cash. This model is considered to be more streamlined since authorized participants would be able to exchange ETF shares directly for Bitcoin. But right now, the current in-cash model requires we trust the ETF issuers to handle the Bitcoin conversions themselves. Don't you think that is interesting? We'll see what happens. Will we finally get in-kind redemptions? Or will our bureaucrats continue forcing us to trust? I think that's a good way to frame it. Forcing us to trust. I always encourage you guys, do not trust. Go out there. Buy your own Bitcoin from the Bitcoin well, whether you're buying OTC, large amounts of Bitcoin, or retail amounts of Bitcoin. Then put your own Bitcoin in a hardware wallet. Again, I think they're all great. There's a lot of great Bitcoin-only hardware wallets. Get whatever one you like, and then back up your Bitcoin hardware wallet the way it should be backed up, and that is on titanium. Again, check out these plates you guys can get from Stampseed. I highly encourage you guys to check them out, and you can get 15% off absolutely anything you want to buy with promo code Luke15. Please do not trust BlackRock, because again, I think trusting these bureaucrats, it's a really bad idea, because as we can see, they are not for freedom. To answer to kind of go full circle here and talk about the paaper Bitcoin attack and what I think it means. I mean, the correctors on the internet can talk all about, they can scream from the rooftops. No, California didn't pass a law to seize your idle Bitcoin, but the reality is they did. That's the reality. Unclaimed Bitcoin sitting on exchange for 3 years can now be claimed by the state. That is the reality. And again, I think the correctors on the internet just also aren't keeping in mind of what is the broader context in the world today. Europe is pushing to backdoor end-to-end encryption. They're openly saying the peasants should not be allowed to hold their own Bitcoin, and they shouldn't be allowed to have private communications on the internet. We should back-end encryption so we see every single one of your messages, every single one of your photos on your phone. We are the government. We deserve to see that. This is what they're openly saying. This is what the EU is talking about. The EU is pushing to end encryption. Look what the EU is saying. These are scary times. Let's backdoor encryption. And of course, why are they taking away encryption for everyone? Oh, it's for the security. It's for the kids. It's for your safety. It's for your own good. Trust the government with your every message, your every photo. In Australia, my home country, digital ID systems are being rolled out at breakneck pace. And guess what? In the UK, look at this. New powers to seize crypto assets used by criminals go live. This is the foot in the door technique I always tell you about. They're trying to say criminals use Bitcoin. So that means nobody should be able to use Bitcoin. Or we at the government are trying to protect you from the criminals. They do it every time. Zoom back to the Patriot Act. After the 2001 event happened, I'm too scared to even say what event it was. It happened in September 2001. Let's remember what happened. The government said, we need to protect you from the terrorists. We're going to enforce the Patriotic Act. What is it? It's the Patriot Act. Let me tell you, it wasn't very patriotic. But again, whenever the government says that we are here to protect you, be very cautious, be very skeptical. Think back to 2020. Boy, I don't want to get myself in trouble here. The government are the real criminals. I agree, RL. Everything goes to zero against Bitcoin. SCB, I agree, my friend. I apologize to the legends who are waiting in the chat for me to get home. I was very late today. I was getting a much needed but terrible haircut. I got stuck in the European traffic. Again, if you guys are in Europe, again, I highly encourage you guys to check out BTC Prague, the biggest Bitcoin conference in Europe. All of the big names and the big dogs are going to be speaking there. I don't know how, but they let this crazy kid with the shit haircut also talk in there. So if you want to see me rant in Europe at BTC Prague, I highly recommend you guys come say good day. Come tell me my haircut is terrible. And just make sure you're in Prague between June 19th and June 21st. As you guys can see, there's a ton of big name speakers. The Giga Chad Michael Saylor's going to be there. Adam Back, Jack Marlers, they're all going to be there. Highly encourage you guys to get around it. Again, if you don't have your tickets to BTC Prague, you can use promo code linked down below to get yourself a little bit of a discount off your tickets. So take advantage of that. And with all that said, there's 700 of you guys in here. Hope you're enjoying your Saturday afternoon. I'm going to keep this one quick and brief. And I'm just going to remind you, if you didn't catch my recent interviews with Peter Dunworth and British Hodl, I'm going to put some links up on screen somewhere around there. If you click on those bad boys, it's going to take you straight to those interviews. So with all that said, thank you so much, everyone who tuned in.